Hi, this is Dr. Divikin Boysen, and welcome to Certified Management Professional. Today, we're going to deal with fundamentals of human resource. In chapter or module 5, we dealt with fundamentals of marketing. We are in module 6 today, and let's just roll and see what we have today. So fundamentals of human resource, we're going to look at what is human resource. That's a definition: recruitment, onboarding, and training, following up health and safety, bullying, harassment and violence, wellness and stress. We're going to look at discipline, and at a point where we have no option than to terminate a staff's appointment. So human resource HR used to focus on very specific processes and had narrowly defined terms such as personnel manager and payroll, etc., etc. And as a discipline, HR has evolved over the past 30 to 50 years and has branched into other fields and other areas such as discipline within the scope of human resource. These areas I just talked about includes recruitment, onboarding, orientation, engagement, training and development, compensation, benefit, health and safety, wellness, strategic planning, and a number of them. Organizations arrange these areas in a way so that they can work harmoniously with them to achieve their strategic objective. And there are several key factors that had enormous impact on the development of HR, such as technology, and which is why we will need to look at this holistically. And it also, human resource also have some sort of workforce challenges. And in view of that, it's important to look at human resource development in order to position the staff in a manner so that the organization benefits from the services of that staff. Human resource, the human being in that organization, which the human resource is one of the priceless assets that any organization can get. And also, as companies consider working in or expanding into foreign markets and have employees working in different locations, then globalization becomes very, very key. And also the demographics of the workforce also impact on the human resource needs. You are looking at in terms of their age, in terms of their culture, in terms of their ethnic groups and other age range in terms of which profession we are looking at, in order to help you build a kind of a skill set to be able to work for the employees to be able to deliver their work seamlessly to achieve organizational objectives. And in order to best manage the workforce as it now exists, there is significant focus on training and development. And development is a long-term something. So if a staff comes in, you onboard a staff, what the human resource manager has in mind is to develop that competencies of that, or the skill set of that staff in order to be able to use that staff to execute a long-term vision, because the organization has a vision, has a destination they want to reach, and it's important that that is done. So that should be the thinking of the human resource manager. Organizations are now focusing on developing individuals and their careers rather than addressing immediate needs and of the job, and which is why I indicated earlier that you're looking at the long-term development of what the human resource. And as human resource evolve, so have the ways we do things have also manage things have also evolved in terms of managing the staff. How they change over time requires that the managers of the human resource, or the human resource manager, also changes the strategy in managing the workforce. And you have the ability to create and maintain workplaces that are fair, that are safe and engaging, by leveraging the strength of human resource skill within the organization and also ourselves. Now, development, as I said, is a long-term process, and that facilitates strategic thinking and capitalizes on experience and aims to reach goals However, training is provided specifically to change behaviors. Take note of that. Training is done to change a certain behavior or attitude in order to meet specific job requirement. And that's the reason why there is a continuous training and development to equip the staff with the requisite skills and competencies to be able to meet the requirements of the job. Now, so we have this what we call trends in human resource development. But for you to know that these trends are, for example, it starts with onboarding the human the staff who have just joined, orienting the staff, using technology, social media, online marketing, doing proactive in recruitment. I mean, issues of work life balance has also evolved, okay, and flex work has also has also come in as a result of COVID and all that, and introduction of the concept of lean and Six Sigma to reduce the cost of managing the human resource itself and the cost of production, also getting things right, have also, come into the space of human resource. So you can see the evolution of human resource in this picture, in this diagram or figure, where you have HR trends, you have work-life balance, you have lean and Six Sigma, you have coaching and mentoring. So beyond training, we coach and also we mentor so that we're able to get people prepared to take over the organization to the next level, what we call succession planning and proactive recruitment, online networking. Flex hours, I talked about flex work now. It has been an emerging trend since prior to even the COVID pandemic striking the world. And people started this where, for example, you can decide that with the 8 hours you're working at home, at work, you will do 4 hours at home and then do the rest at work, maybe probably because of the traffic condition and all that. Mothers who are breastfeeding will prefer to execute their tasks at home, but there are KPIs to meet, and these guys will have to work towards that to achieve these KPIs in that. Then we have technology, onboarding, etc., etc. So to start with, when we start with recruitment, for instance, which is part of the trend, recruitment is seen as one of the significant step in human resource management, because staff would have to be recruited, and the recruitment process is a long process. Today, there are sophisticated technologies that are used in the recruitment work process. But if you look at the cycle, we recruit, we filter, we interview, we select, we onboard, we train, and then we analyze, and this is the filter. So a major component of human resource process or management process is the recruitment. And essentially, recruitment is about defining the organization need for the human resource and also bringing the right resource in. Once the resource have joined, it is left with the HR to keep them and then retrain them as well. And typically, organizations go through a formal and informal process to achieve this. And when there is a vacancy, they make sure this thing is done. And in some organizations, simply getting permission to fill a vacancy becomes an odious challenge. But once that vacancy is there, there's a need to fill that vacancy. And once the processes start, the pattern is very similar from one place to the next. And although the steps seem straightforward, sometimes it doesn't look that way because it's more of an interaction process. And so one stage can overlap the other, even though we are looking at it from a certain sequential order. So the job selection process goes through to 7 steps or stages, and these are what I spoke about. You first analyze, you do your job analysis, see what gap that needs to be filled. You recruit, you do your filtering, interview, select, onboard, and then retrain. That's the cycle I took you guys through. So the first stage is the job analysis. And as I said, in which a manager analyzes the job requirement and considers what we call the skill the knowledge, skills, and ability, the KSAs, okay? They do that, and that one that is done, then we know that there's a position to be filled, and then we know the job description. Then the next stage is recruiting, which focuses on finding the attractive and the right candidate for that position. And the best way to start this recruitment, or the most appropriate way to start this recruitment process, is to have a good idea where your candidates are. You have some sort of an idea where they are. And the most effective way to do this is to also know what interests them and where they tend to congregate, and also in a shrinking labor market where they are already working. You just want to know these things so that it gives you some sort of ideas how to address this whole recruitment process. Because when you have that information, it's easy for you to know who really you are dealing with. Okay, and once you have this list that have been put together, it is time now to filter them. You do the filtering based on the requirement, the job requirement you have, what you develop. That's the analysis stage. What you came out with, you use that as the criteria to filter. And it is not necessary to interview every candidate by the same token. Okay, some people do not interview well and yet can provide supporting and interesting information to you through screening and testing. So interview might not be the best approach to do that. Sometimes even a phone call to the person can if the person is saying that, hey, you're interviewing somebody who is going to take care of customer care, then you would want to actualize that. You want to put that into motion for the person to see that if the person fits that job. So for example, if you're hiring a customer service representative that will spend a lot of time on the phone, then conduct an initial short interview over the phone. That's what I said. And if they sound professional and confident, then you can consider face-to-face interview. And once you filter candidates using a number of techniques to do that, some organizations even use their CVs as the basis to screen them to make sure that if they met the criteria or not. It might be a good strategy, but you might end up throwing very good candidates out. So it's very important, even though those nitty-gritties are required, it's important that you look at this from a broader perspective, something that a filtering process that really do not exclude people from the process based on some, as it were, minor errors that they committed, but rather using a very elaborate means to do the filtering so that it can help accommodate or include those who might, for instance, miss the first line of those requirements, but might have something very good to offer. Those guys might miss out because you decided to use that stringent measure to do the filtering. So an example is what we gave. If you're having a phone call with the person who is going to stay on the phone, that's more interactive. That should tell you that the person is good or not. Then you can progress to the next stage. It is important that you also know that you are interviewing what you're interviewing for, and be prepared for it, and be ready for candidates to have plenty of questions. There are some candidates who are going to ask a lot of questions. And we say that after interview, you might have identified the perfect candidate, but you need to hold on. You need to hold on. You have to check references first. They give some references. You have to do some sort of background check certificate if there are no counterfeit certificates. And these things has to be done, vigorously. Okay, make the arrangement to call or email previous employees, customers, or peers to verify what you have learned in that interview. And then, however, you have to make sure that your candidates consent to such references check. They would have to consent to that. They gave an information that these are my referees. They gave information that these are my certificates. So you need to make sure that they consent. Once you are comfortable with the candidate, make make an offer and be prepared to negotiate, especially in the tight labor market. Once an offer is approved, you have a new employee, and hence you have to prepare to onboard them to the organization, introduce them to the specific teams and supervisors or managers, and make sure that they build that relationship and rapport with said people. So this is a kind of a brief recruitment process that, as a manager, as a certified management professional, you need to know. Remember that the dynamics are changing, and people are not using the conventional means or the formal means for interviewing. People are really looking at extra things, attitude. The respect they have. We see these things on social media, short videos, where in an interview, they decide, one that I watched, they decide to keep the office very dirty. And once these staff were coming in, or that this aspirants or candidates were coming in, most of them just had to, they pass by and complain about the filth. But there was this lady who came in and rather took the mopping stick and started mopping. And it was just amazing. Immediately, the manager came and then said that you are the right person for the job, because I wanted someone who can see a situation and then solve that situation, and not necessarily waiting for other people to come. So this is also very, very important. Very, very important. This is the trend that is happening now. So the job selection process goes into 7 steps or stages. And like I said, analyze, recruit, filter, select, onboard, and then retrain. We have discussed that already. Now, let's look at other aspects of recruitment also when we have done the first stage. So let's look at that. So still on the recruitment process, another pitfall to avoid while interviewing is what we call the stereotype and the halo effect, okay, where you preempt, look at somebody's outfit or how nice that person look like, and then you ascribe some sort of good attitude to that person. That is wrong, okay? You would have to avoid judging people because of certain stereotype and halo effect. And the halo effect is seen when a person attribute is presumed to reflect some kind of truth, okay? Because the person is in a tie, you think that he's a good person. And for example, a person who is perceived as physically attractive is frequently considered more intelligent and sociable than someone who is less attractive, even in the absence of what proof. That idea of appearance at first sight is very important. It gives a certain impression. We have been doing this, leveraging on that and making a lot of mistakes over the past years. Additionally, you have to fairly interview candidates irrespective of the agenda, race. So racism, issues of ethnicism, these things we should eschew this as managers. Color, religion, ethnicity, and once you have interviewed candidates, you have to base your judgment on the established behavioral criteria rather than comparing and contrasting the characteristics of the candidates to another. So effective managers realize that interviews alone are not a great indicator of job performance, especially on structured and informal interviews. Now, there is that sort of relationship between effective hiring decisions and a poor choice that we make. And we need to just look at that. Interview might be one. There might be other things that you would want to also further do to consolidate your results that you've gotten from the interview. Otherwise, you can almost skip the interview and draw straws up to select the right person. You can also do that. Now what is happening is that they are rather poaching people Organizations are poaching people. If you look at the World Economic Forum, I mean, they have indicated some 20 skill sets that employers are looking for. And one of such skill sets is critical thinking and then complex problem solving skills. Okay. And then there are other ones, data science and all that. So some companies might not want to go through building, taking some people from the scratch and retraining them. They might want to pick the top notch right away. So that is also something that can be considered. And that is why sometimes testing, accurate references, and the use of portfolio and actual example of work are so helpful. Rather than I sit on interview panels, and what I do is I rather use case studies, okay, that I create a scenario and would want the staff to, and the candidate to look at that scenario, and if it's possible that that person can do something about it. For instance, you can create a scenario where the company is facing some serious challenges in terms of, I mean, financing, producing their product. They have low cash, and you are a marketing movie. Okay, maybe you have been employed as a sales manager. The question is that with this financial situation we find ourselves, what strategies can you put in order to increase demand so that we'll be able to meet our financial commitment and also even pay staff and all that? And such a question should allow that manager to bring in new ideas to be able to solve, I mean, this problem. So during interview, ask questions that are job specific and concentrate on job knowledge and skills that are related to performance and increasing your ability to forecast success on the job. All right. So there are some sort of questions that we have here that you shouldn't ask, and there are others that you should ask. So we have the do's and the don'ts. So you do not ask this question. Said, this job requires a lot of walking. Can you do it? I mean, you don't ask that question, but rather ask, this job requires you to be on your feet for most of the day. Do you have the physical condition that we should know about in considering you as a candidate? You see how that question is asked, and it puts the person, it's more detailed, and it puts the person, gives the person more information to be able to answer the questions. And then you also do not ask this question, we would like a photo to attach to your application because of the number of applicants. Would you mind supplying us with one? This will lead to bias during recruitment process based on the physical attractiveness. All staff have their picture. So you do this, you ask this, all staff have their picture on our internal website so that we can recognize one another easily. If you are hired, would you mind having picture taken for that purpose? Okay. When you do that, it's easy. And then several other questions that, I mean, has been enumerated that you can go through. So these are the do's and the don'ts. When the recruitment process is done, the next stage is the onboarding. Now we want to onboard and then retain the staff. We say onboarding and retaining. So once a candidate has been selected, it is time to onboard them to the organization and provide orientation about work norms. We are talking about norms, ethics, culture, processes, tools, people, how they should relate to them. Onboarding is very critical. In other jurisdictions, we call this orientation, okay? Staff orientation. So you're onboarding the staff, you will need to make sure that the staff knows about the work environment, the do's and don'ts, various critical departments, who are the team members. All these things are very, very important. So we say that onboarding is critical function in human resource management, usually contributes to the candidate desire to stay with the organization. And once onboarding is done correctly, the process of retentions kicks off, okay? You know, there's a problem of staff turnover where people take on board, recruit staff, and then within 3 or 4 days or a week, the staff decide not to turn out because of some attitude or something that is missing in the organization. So this is very, very important. If you do the onboarding very well, it it helps in the staff retention strategy. So the retention process is all about building the environment and system that would help people stay within the organization. Now, although retention starts during the interview process at the point, the point is that it offers some sort of perception. Okay, it creates some sort of perception for their staff. The way the interview panel, the poster, and the way how well they sell the organization have an impression on the mindset of the interviewee. So it's important that when we are interviewing, and really, if we are interested in these candidates becoming part of the organization, their skill sets are needed, we put the organization in a certain position that sells itself so that it have a good impression on the staff. And we are saying that on the candidates, we are saying that although retention starts during the interview process, at the point where an offer of employment is made, it continues through the process of onboarding, following up and developing a new employee. Usually it takes about 2 weeks, some 3 weeks for someone to decide to stay with the company or not. So onboarding process is critical, and as well as its training. And in some jurisdiction, when you come in, when they recruit you, you have to go through a structured training process. Some takes as much as 3 months to really integrate you into the system. Okay, they do a product consultation, orientation to make sure that they integrate you properly. So you know your whereabouts. You don't ask too many questions. You can kickstart your job because you've been properly integrated into the system. So consider the effect of bringing someone who does not engage becomes an issue. It's very, very important. So it's very, very important that the person who is doing the onboarding does it in a way that is compelling and that will integrate that person very much. Now, even more compelling is the cost of someone who joins the organization. Okay, that's the cost of recruitment. Then checks out emotionally. Look at what you do. You do adverts. I mean, maybe you hire some expert to come and help you in recruiting the staff and all that. Then at the end of the day, after the recruitment process, that staff has been selected, and all of a sudden, the staff within 2 weeks leaves because the onboarding process was not done. We're saying that onboarding is a critical function in human resource management, usually contributes to the candidate's desire to stay with the organization or not. So therefore, the onboarding process has to be planned and executed effectively to ensure that the new employees become effective contributors to the organization. And onboarding orientation is not filling out forms. Like I said, it's not just doing that. Now, it is the responsibility of the HR and the other colleagues to actively involve and be interested in helping the new employees settle down. That is very, very important, so that there's that smooth sail in transitioning from outside to the new organization. An effective manager or supervisor, you would have to ensure that an effective onboarding process exists and is being followed. And you have to introduce the person to the organization, especially immediate and frequent contracts and resources, and also ensure that schedules for first several days a week, everything is done. You incorporate them, give them a warm welcome, getting to know the teams and getting familiar with the workforce. You also have to establish objectives for the first 30, 60, 90 days. Make sure that the employee is not disadvantaged when it comes to information and the tools that the employee would have to use to execute his work. Employee engagement studies provide additional opportunity to discover what your employees like or dislike and that helps them to, or motivates them. So in uncovering what engages them, you can also determine where you can strengthen your organization through a commitment to what retention strategy. And you are talking about retention, because it doesn't make sense to spend so much money, recruit someone, and at the end of the day, the person leaves. Okay, that is cost to the organization, and it's a waste of also time. So the onboarding and retaining process is crucial. So for example, if your employee identified that their work is too complex and that they are unable to exercise any flexibility with their work schedules, changing those circumstances can improve their retention. Okay, it can. And in addition, as a labor market worldwide continues to shrink, we will be competing for the same candidates, okay, for more jobs than we are workers. We'll be doing that on the market because now the competition, those who have certain specific skill sets, I mean, are the ones that we are all chasing after, okay? So assuming you bring such people in and you are not able to onboard them well, then that becomes what? A problem. So the flexibility is very, very important. When you have done that, then the next stage is to do follow-up. So recruit, onboard, retain, and then follow-up. So what do you do? When a company is committed to attracting the right people, they develop good people. That is true. And this can help a company that is making an effort to be an employer of choice. So if you speak to people who work for just such organization, you will then know, you probably know that their recruitment efforts are eased by the fact that candidates come to them asking for the privilege of working together. People do that because of, their track record. And so how do you do your part to help the employer achieve this kind of prestigious or esteemed status? Okay, and that is done by simply doing some of these onboarding and retaining strategies. Okay, but beyond that, you also need to follow up. And just think of it this way: checking in with your employees will help them from checking out. Checking in with them, these are the new ones. As effective manager, you have to regularly follow up with new employees. You need follow-up. You gave them orientation. You have integrated them into the system. They know their teams. They know their departments. They know where to do their changeovers. They know their job descriptions. They know where the clinic is. They know the safety rules and all that. But you need to check on them. You need to do that. And you keep track. So before the first day, schedule safety training with them, what we call the WHMS, which is Workforce Hazardous Material Information System. You would want to do that. And the H25 that talks about, the safety rules and the driving first aid, you need to do that. Set up workspace for them, such as IT request, telephone setup. Where is their computer or their laptops, their name tags, okay, business cards, cell phones. You need to follow up. Probably they told them they were going to give these things to them. Okay, so which department is responsible for that? Who are they talking to? Most times we bring employees in, these guys recruit them, and then we leave them, so they would have to go chase. Sometimes even a place to sit, okay, the furniture becomes an issue. They would have to go and chase. So we don't properly do the follow-up. We think that once we have indicated that some departments are responsible for that, then that's it. But this is not right. Advise when and where to arrive on the first day. That is very, very important. To whom they should report to. Advise where to park their cars. Announce upcoming arrival to existing staff. Assign someone, such as the co-worker, to conduct tour on the first day. You want them to know the washrooms, where the washrooms are, okay? The coat rooms, the break, the lunch, emergency exits, master stations, etc. You want these things to be done. So on the first day, these things, and you have to also take care of this list. Physical space and IT security. washrooms, lunchrooms, economic evaluation. Sorry, economic. I was thinking of econometric because I've been teaching on that. So it's the same, economic evaluation. So what we are talking about here is economics talks about your work environment and how you are able, the work environment helps you or prevent some sort of danger happening to you. That is all about economics, okay? And what it means is that if the person is sitting on a chair and the chair that the person is sitting on, it's not well positioned in terms of the economics, then that person is going to have a problem. Maybe, back pain or waist pain because it is not properly, positioned, or it is not fit to be used for sitting. 2, those using on computers who doesn't have screen filters. Today, we have screen filters that are embedded in laptops and all. Those times you need to get, they call it a screen guard or a screen shield so that you don't have serious eye rays getting into your eyes and damaging, your senses in there. And then also those who sit for a very long time without standing, maybe as part of the econometrics procedures, you want to list certain rules and regulations that should guide the person, that when you work for 30 minutes, you need to stand and stretch and all that. It could happen not with only computers, even at the shop floor where people are working and all that. You would want to make sure that they do not, as it were, abuse, themselves by adapting to the rules and regulations. For instance, if you have to stand as a machinist for 4 hours and you break, you don't do 6 hours. That is harmful to your environment. And that the environment is congenial, okay, that is welcoming, that there are no hazards around that will cause any havoc to the employee. So we are talking about supplies, smoking area, lockers, and all, IT security, computer and login information, email ID card, building access card, and then cell phone policy. All these things are very, very important. And when you come to supervisor and manager, there are also lists of items you need to look. First aid room supplies, and more major duties, responsibilities, and all that. Then HR orientation. Okay, you also have what the HR manager should also do. These are the follow-ups. You just want to check that these things are done. And most times, the worker is left to worry about these things. And the new worker who has come in is the one who is chasing after some of these things. It doesn't really help in retaining the employee. So what happens is that the person stays for 1 month, 2 months, nothing is happening, and then the person has to quit. Okay, now remember, we have spent so much money for this recruitment process, and yet the staff was unable to stay. So sometimes you follow up with your follow-up will be based on the employee's orientation checklist plan. Okay, you want to see if everything is done, and simply making sure that each area in the plan is covered adequately. Other items may be added to your checklist based on the conversation with the employee as and when it becomes necessary. And these regular interactions, which may be short and seem informal, or could follow a more formal tone, also give the employee the opportunity to ensure that he or she has made the best decision possible in coming to your organization. So if that person is able to get the information they need when they need it, the chance of developing a strong and engaged employee continue to grow. And therefore, it is recommended that you set up a follow-up regular schedule to integrate your new employee. And depending on the role they are hired for or to, and your role, the schedule will vary. But there are few key things that you would have to focus on. You would have to look at these things. And first of all is that the employee should meet with you each day in the first week. That is very important. Second, the employee should meet with you or your designate, okay, or your assistant every 2 weeks for the first 3 months on your job and monthly thereafter. And if you are now at providing this level of follow-up for your new employee, then you are damn sure that the possibility or the probability for this employee to remain in the organization will be, or to be retained, will be very high. Aside that, the health and safety of the employee is also very important. And it's very important that we protect the employee from every harm. The environment within which the employee is working, it's very good so that it doesn't generate any kind of hazard for the employee. Now, health and safety is a shared responsibility. The employee has his, the organization has his. But we are talking about from the organization's perspective now. So what the organization is supposed to do. So each province, territory, state, or country that you work in has its own safety rules and regulations. And there are legislation. The labor force has its own legislation. For us in Ghana, we have a Labor Act, and there's a legislation enacted by Parliament indicating what employers are required to give to employees to make sure that their work environment is congenial. There's the condition, what we call the condition of service. Okay, you would have to make sure when it comes to worker safety that they work in a safe, clean environment. So it means that what this means is that the employer should be able to provide that safety environment for the employees to work. The essence of workers' compensation program meant that workers in designated occupation could receive assistance in the form of wage replacement and medical care if they were the subject of work-related injury. That is in some organizations, even when you are injured, they even sponsoring, if the injury is very severe, sponsoring you to be treated outside becomes an issue. People now have come to the organization as a full-fledged human being, and they leave as a defamed person, okay, which is very bad. So some organizations don't take some of these things seriously. And as a manager, it's important that you look at this. You have this knowledge. You are not the HR manager here. You are just manager, a divisional manager. And you need to know these things to be able to work with the HR manager to get the best for your staff. In addition, the organization that they work for is protected from civil suit put forward by the employee who has been injured. They do that. So, for instance, you go to places and then you park your car, and then there is a disclaimer notice there that they are not responsible for any thefts and all that. You see these things every day. I checked into a hotel, and I was told that if I receive any harm or somebody comes in to harm me, they are not responsible. Now, I told them that once I'm here, my security is in your hand. Whatever I paid, you would have to take that responsibility, because I've paid for lodging in the hotel. You have to provide security. You have to make sure, people don't come in, except that I have visitors that you might not know what their intentions are. So these things are very, very important. The governing bodies can level fines against an employer who disregard the health and safety of their workforce. That's in addition to charging insurance premiums sufficient to cover the cost of the program. So therefore, it is very, very important for you as an effective manager to understand the governmental rules for health and safety, and in each jurisdiction that you operate in, and ensure full compliance to protect your employees. okay, new employees and existing ones. So each jurisdiction provides frequent training as well as information about obligation. In some organization, periodically they do some sort of drills, okay, safety, health and safety drills, just to make sure that employees are well informed and they are in right shape to be able to counter any external safety or health what's hazard. They are that is done, and they are provided with the necessary PPEs, okay, necessary PPEs to be able to protect themselves and then work effectively. They have the safety guard and everything so they can work. If you have health and safety staff within your organization, they can bring you up to speed very quickly on the local rules. If you have some experts in there, they can, and they are probably very competent at what they do, but you are the one responsible for having the required systems in place, and then you also meet the requirement of the legal obligations and ensure that new employees receive appropriate training on them. There are some organizations, if you get in safety, health and safety course, it's compulsory. You have to go through like 3 months. Make sure they integrate you very well because it's a very high security area. As an example, employees who work in positions that put them at risk of injury need safety training. I've just highlighted that before they enter into the workspace, not several days later. Workplace health, but the material information that I talked about, the WHMIS, full protection, and the personal protective equipment, the PPE, such as earplugs, safety vests, and so on, are all part of the safety training. Employees who work along may also be subjected to some legislation that will have an impact on the way the work is carried out. So effective managers understand governmental rules for health and safety, and in each jurisdiction they operate in and ensure full compliance to protect all employees, new and existing. This is very key. Okay, this is very key. Then we come to one other interesting aspect: harassment and violence at workplace, bullying. Okay, this is something that the laws of every land infringes. The laws do not allow people to do these things to their fellow colleagues. Those who bully people at workplace, harassment, sexual harassment, violence, these things are things that there are rules in every organization that speaks against this. And those who are found capable doing that, the appropriate sanctions will be levied on them. There are some employees, for some reason, they see themselves as superiors because they've been in the organization for a very long time, and they try to make new employees, they don't make their life very easy for them when they are onboarded. Okay, they make life very difficult for them, especially when these guys are team leaders and they are the ones to train you and all that. So violence is becoming more common where people work in contact with employees, clients, and other general people. Aggression often starts with an anger that will trigger in the form of a slight or something that is irritating. And when it comes to losing our temper, our impulse is controlled by our inhibitions. Okay, and once that is made up of the knowledge and perhaps fear of repercussion and consequences, as well as social and cultural whatnot. So once somebody becomes angry, or there's a disagreement of how a job should be executed, or how something is to be fixed, this can generate some sort of harsh words and some sort of attack. People might raise their voice, others might want to disagree. And if this thing is not managed, this conflict can generate into something else. So violence, bullying, and harassment can manifest in so many ways. And violence offense begin with a conflict. I've talked about that. For example, two people with different ideas about how something should be done. The conflict escalates, and one person who is decisive will, start yelling at the other person, okay? And if you are not very careful, then beyond exchanging words, they begin to be very physical. And this can be very, very, serious, okay? So what we are saying that the conflict escalates where one person decisive, they will stop at nothing to get what they want, okay? Which might lead to physical, verbal, or written incidents such as attack, threats, offensive joke, gossip, threats, offensive notes, and letters. If such behaviors happen, you and the organization have to intervene, and you being the manager have to intervene immediately. Otherwise, people's productivity will suffer, and the organization will face many repercussions or consequences, such as staff turnover. As we talked about, staff might leave, poor morale, absenteeism, legal costs because people abuse others. They file some sort of court suit against them and tarnish a reputation, and negative media coverage by the media. So you don't want to get into this arena, okay? So most organizations have politics regarding harassment, bullying, and violence within the scope of the human resource and health and safety. They have policies, they have policies within that, and any allegation must be acknowledged and investigated in terms of those policies. And subsequently, actions must be taken. If the employer refuses to acknowledge safety risks and do what they can do to reduce and eliminate them, they can be held responsible through the court for not exercising that duty of care. All right. So that is very, very important. Apart from exercising even the duty of care, it is their sole responsibility to execute that task. Fortunately, most employers want to comply with workplace health and safety rules to provide safety workplace to their employees. So bullying is one aspect, and in such situations, if a manager doesn't work decisively, that becomes what? A problem. I'm saying that your role includes, as a manager, providing staff with tools to report issues and a way to deal with issues that arise. If people are being bullied, there should be the right procedure to report some of these things. It should be clear so that people, and also encourages people to report when they are being bullied. Since many problems are resolved through informal means, the best tools may be those that simply allow for people to have a conversation, for example, and to facilitate discussion that will mediate problems before they escalate to the next level. Now, so in such situations, you as a manager have to act firmly and effectively, as we said. And additionally, you have to model principles and standards of diversity in every work environment and set the ground rules. Those who bring racism in the organization, who defy other ethnic groups or other race, you would have to, if it's a multinational company, have to make sure that the ground rules are set very well. If inappropriate behaviors arise, deal with them immediately and do not let small things, grow. If you ignore them, your staff may think that you either approve of the behavior or that you simply do not care. And that will not be a good sign of a manager. When you recognize harassment, bullying, or an escalating conflict, take initiative. That is very, very important. Take initiative and ensure that that appropriate steps are taken. If you are not in the position to act, then or lack confidence yourself, then raise the issue, escalate it to a higher manager to be able to address that problem. Okay. Then we have the wellness and safety. We talked about health and safety. This one, wellness and safety. And all that we are saying, the employees need to be of the sound mind and healthy to be and fit to be able to work. So the health of every employee is very, very important. So the question is, do we have a system where we do regular health checks of employees, that every 3 months they have to go to the hospital, do clinic, do some checks, run some checks, so you know that, this employee has, a very healthy, system, or it is something that the organization leave at the discretion of the employees. I've indicated earlier that the human resource of every organization is one of the most priceless assets. And once it is so, it is the manager's responsibility that they check on the health. In one of the organizations that I used to work, this was a routine process that people have to go and then check, and people were not doing. At a point in time, they issue some sort of directive for us to do that. And it will amaze you, at a point in time, they realized that about 70% of the staff all had BP. And because they work in an environment which is more hazardous, there is more external elements that really, it's not something that the environment that the organization can control. It's an external environment, but there are things that are done to prevent some of these things. They realized that 70% of the staff all had BP. And that was worrying, because then they started making sure that now people were wearing their PPEs, and then they are taking the right medications that they were given, just to avoid that, because some of their top staff were in that category, and it was worrying, because if they lose them, then that is going to affect the organization. So wellness is not just about feeling good, and also it's not about employee taking full responsibility of their workforce health either. However, people are looking for places that respect that they have a life outside of work. Okay, they want a place where the organization respect that apart from working for you, I have also my life outside work. In some organizations, they take everything out of you. As if that even if you get to the house, there's an email, that has to be responded at a certain hour that is beyond working hours. So wellness is just for you to respect that people have a life outside the work environment, and that if it's time for them to go on leave, allow them to go. If it is time for them to go on medical checkups, allow them to go. Sometimes we retain this staff, we abuse them, then they end up losing their lives. It has happened countless times, okay? So wellness addresses the psychological, cognitive, and physical health of your workforce, and this includes issues that can originate at work and at home. Some people come to work with a number of issues. There's no peace in the house, and then they even close from work and they are not able to go home. The reason why some people stay at work for long hours is nothing. So there are some people, they stay up to 10, and you ask yourself, they just want to get home and then sleep. So how do the manager work around to be able to accommodate some of these issues and to deal with them, so people come to work with a sound mind? That is very, very, and this can be done through conversation, informal conversation, asking about issues about, the home, if the person is willing to share. We can also have an industrial psychologist, okay, who can be around and also help to address some of these things. There are two major concerns for workplaces: medical and mental health. And the first area of concern is the medical health of employees and the avoidance of contagious diseases such as cold and influenza. Organizations must have policies to deal with employees' sickness, and also to provide them with the medical coverage and also other advice. Also, they might educate a healthy working lifestyle among employees, and also, for instance, install sanitizers. The period of COVID, we've seen this in different locations in the workplace. Now, the second area of concern within the scope of that concern that the two major concern has to do with the wellness, which is what a mental health. People tend to use the word stress very casually, and yet the effect of negative stress over time can have tremendous impact on people. It can have it on their lives. Positive stresses can enrich our lives. The ongoing presence and pressures of negative stress can lead to mental and physical, health. There are negative stresses and then there are positive stresses. This topic is not to delve into it, but for you to know that any stress of yours that gives you a positive. Some people go through stress and rather they get relief, okay, in terms of psychological problems and all. Others go through negative stress and then the effect is very detrimental. So whichever, type of stress that comes in, it is important that the manager knows that these things exist, and as they see any sign of this or signs of this, they are able to get in and then make sure these things do not extend so that it will affect the employee. The last two topics we're going to deal with is discipline and termination. Now, having dealt with the process, recruitment, we do the onboarding and retention, we do follow up, okay? And then we also, after follow up, we talked about the health and safety. We talked about bullying. Then we have also dealt with wellness and safety. Now we are talking about discipline. Now, discipline essentially is to help shape behavior. We have that, a manager should have that in mind. It is not necessarily to make people uncomfortable, it's to just shape behavior. So despite our best effort to make sure that employees we have the right people and all that we go through recruitment on, you might end up seeing certain behaviors which did not, spring up during the earlier days. And it could be that the work environment has shaped that person, maybe having peer pressure from work, those who do not want to work well. It could affect the employee, but employees might show signs of incompetence when they lack skills or knowledge needed for the job, or misconduct when an employee knows what they are responsible for but neglects those responsibilities. That is where the issue of discipline will come in. And in both situations, performance will suffer. And when such thing happens, you need to act quickly. Letting a problem linger because you do not like to address performance issue can easily mean that poor work becomes the normal routine that we are all working. And then the first step, you need to clarify to the employees the expectation of the job position, since if he does not know what he is doing, being measured against, then it is pretty hard for him to improve. So if you don't allow the employee to know what he's supposed to meet, that's the KPIs, then it becomes very, very important and difficult for the employee to know what you expect from him, because it is performance that we are measuring against, the target that we have set for the employees. If it is otherwise, then you have to follow organization discipline policy, okay? If he does not conform to what the KPIs, he's missing the target, he knows what to do, then you have to, just activate some of these policies and make sure that the policy works as expected. If there's a need to issue some sort of queries, it has to be done. So the employee, so in some organization, the first step is to have a conversation with the employee. That's sometimes an informal conversation that you are not meeting your targets. There's a need for you to improve on what you are doing, X, Y, Z. And if the employee decides not to, you do an assessment and this thing keeps happening, then the next stage is to give what a query. Effective managers provide adequate direction to ensure that employees know what the company policies are and that they are applied consistently and then fairly. Work with the employee to resolve the problem by applying organizational discipline process and clearly and consistently documenting the actions that you take through the process. That is very, very important. So all the processes that we have to go through, including support, training, incident of misconduct, meeting, coaching section, you have to go through, or you have to document that this employee has been taken through this process, and yet still we seem not to see our way forward. So the next thing, the next policy has to be activated, okay, or implemented. It's important to realize that discipline is not meant to punish people. I've said initially, it is to shape behavior. So on the contrary, discipline is a method of behavior correction and allow you to take actions when employee performance is below the belt, okay? When the employee lack the skills to perform their work at an acceptable level, a meeting to clarify the expectation of the job is necessary. That is one. And that at this stage, you are open with the employee and you let them know what is happening and how their non-performance is affecting targets and how that is not helping us meet our vision, right? So, however, you have to act promptly, because if you are considered to have ignored the problem and thereby condone the poor performance, you cannot use it as the reason for what? Dismissal. If you didn't act and the thing has escalated to what? A certain level, you can't use that as a basis to punish the person, but because it was your lack of what? Action that led to that. Next, you need to assess whether the person has the ability to learn the skills needed to do that correction. Okay, because we are saying that we are correcting behavior. If performance improve, if you do that and performance improve, if you give that person the skill, the training, and performance improve, then the process has been successful. Other than that, if they have not improved, then you are closer to determining whether terminating their employment, if terminating their employment is justified. So as a key thing to look at, we are saying that the first step of discipline process is to clarify to the employee the expectation of the job position, since if he does not know what he is doing is being measured against, then it is pretty hard for him to improve. He should know the target. And if he knows the target, then he will know that this is the target. And because I didn't meet it, this is what the policy is saying. Regardless of the training that have been given, this is what the policy is saying. If the infraction is minor, fine, speak with the employee and allow all sides of the issue to be heard through an investigation. Collect and document the fact. I keep saying that document the fact, including witness statements, and outline the consequences of the job expectations are not met. And if you agree that behavior will be corrected, and that is what occurred, then the discipline process ends. But if not, in all situations, the scenarios you have to ensure, in all situations and scenarios, you have to ensure that you go step by step while documenting the process. But why am I saying this? Most people do not go through this process because they are the owners of the business, because they think they can hire and fire. They think that the labor laws, particularly the private organizations, they will one day just issue a termination letter and then terminate the employees for appointment, just like that, even without any salary or severance, nothing. But when that happens, that employee can take a legal action against the organization. The process of discipline has to be what? Documented. So it serves as evidence of the processes that you went through till it got to the stage where you had to terminate the employee's appointment. So that is very, very important. So we are saying that again, you'll have to produce a written document that confirms what is taking place and the consequence if job expectations are not met. I've spoken about that. It is significantly important also that you comply with the organization discipline rules and policies. Once the suspension has ended, so we have given the employee a first hearing, we have spoken about it, we've told the employees the requirements, and then the necessary training has been given, yet so the employee is not able to meet the requirement, the KPIs. So the next stage is that now we are doing that, we are giving what the suspension, but we are explaining to employee why we have moved to the next stage. So once suspension has ended, your next step is to try and forge an agreement that will not be any further misconduct. So the employee has gone for suspension, he's come back. Okay. Now we still do another training. We still do make sure that, okay, the employee understands the KPIs, understands what is required of him. And you are now in a stronger position when you have done all that to determine whether the last resort dismissal is warranted. That is, if the employee is given the after suspension now fails to what? Execute or fails to achieve target, then that's what the next thing is. You'll be in the position. Some people do not want to trigger that part because they will be seen as bad managers and all that. But the point is that it's important that if the employee is not performing, then it is you condoning that, you are being the problem of the organization, because your responsibility as a manager is to supervise that particular employee. There's not about being inhumane, but making sure that targets are met and then the vision of the organization is achieved. Said in many organizations, the first step of discipline process will be to manage the supervisor, and it will be to manage, but it should be to manage the situation by the supervisor and the HR representative. The HR representative may attend the meeting with you, assess the documentation, ensure that the discipline policy is being followed and fairly and all that. If questions arise, then checking with your legal department is also very appropriate in some cases, because you don't want to get yourself into certain things. So the legal department will tell you that, okay, if you've gone through all this, then you can trigger a dismissal letter. Others will say that, no, we have not finished. We have to exhaust the process comprehensively so that we don't have any legal action against. So throughout this discipline process, keep in mind that the goal is to modify behavior. I've said this thing several times, and we have to get it. Finally, if all what we said doesn't work, if all that process doesn't work, then we have reached a situation where we cannot turn back. And this is where we say we need to say goodbye to the worker. We are terminating the appointment with the worker. But remember, if we have exhausted all the process and we've gone through all the policies as it has been established by the organization, then we are not looking at any legal battle with the staff, even though the staff can seek some court redress, but that is not really going to affect us because we have done what is right. But sometimes it might seem actually impossible to fire an employee, especially in most government institutions. Private institution, I mean, sometimes pretty easy, but in government institution, the number of committees, rigorous process that one has to go through is not easy at all. And that is done to protect the employee, make sure that somebody will not wake up one day and say that, hey, I've fired you. No. So should you find yourself continuing trying to modify an employee's behavior and it is not working, then dismissal termination is logical, the next step to follow. And if it is, of course, possible to terminate employees, and it is easier in cases of clear and serious misconduct or breach, sometimes it is so. But even less serious or cumulative events can lead to what? Termination. Those ones that are not that serious, but you see, it cumulates. Every day, the person does the same thing. You talk to the person, gone through the process, suspension. There are people who've gone through 3 or 4 suspensions. They are doing the same thing. That could also lead to termination. But the time you reach the state where you are considering termination, by that time you reach that state where you are considering termination, terminating anyone, you would have had to review the disciplinary steps you have taken. You have to go back and review step by step to make sure that, the process were followed because of legal action. At this stage, it is crucial. Before actually threatening to dismiss anyone, you need to ensure that you have met and discussed the matter with HR and legal department. We've talked about if necessary. If you do not have HR and legal department because you work in a small organization, then check your superiors to ensure that you have the authority to act as you see fit, and you are acting in compliance with organizational policies and HR policies in the jurisdiction you are working with it. So during this process, you have to ensure that the documentation, as I said, is complete and excellent. You make sure that all the paperwork are in order, and then that what you are documenting is part of the process. Stick to the fact in your documentation. Leave your personal opinions out of it. Sign and date your notes and any letters to the employee, and ask the employee to sign and date anything that you provide with them as received and read. These things are very important because if you go into the legal area and they do not have to agree to the content of the document, but should sign the date and date it to indicate that they have received it. Part of the documentation can also come from another person, such as the HR or a consultant who will be engaged to do this work. If they attend any meetings with you, ask them to also take notes as well. The problem is that if you don't do that, then you would have not been fair with the employee you are dealing with. So you leave all your opinions out and make sure the right thing is done. So there's a lot of thoughts that goes into actually making a decision of terminating someone. Part of this is emotional, and part of it is also logical. So you would have to draw the line. When you struggle to make the decision for any reason, consider that your turmoil may come from wondering if you are really making the best decision. Of course, the reason that you stomach all the could not have to do, or could not also have to do with the increased tension that managing this particular employee has brought. Okay, if managing this employee, there be highs and lows, especially when you have had personal discussion with the person, you have hammered on the issue several times, but this guy will not listen. Okay, then that becomes a problem. So discuss your decision-making process with the HR and your immediate manager to get their support. Okay, we are saying that during termination process, you have to ensure that your documentation is complete and excellent. Don't forget that. Some employees will present themselves such a way that you may question your judgment about firing them, and ask the following questions. These things are going to help you track. You ask yourself those questions when you're taking that decision. Am I being hard on this person unnecessarily? You have to ask. Obviously, there have been continuous poor performance or misconduct, maybe for a very long time. So you need to ask yourself that question. How serious were the infractions or performance issues that led to this? You need to ask. Do I still believe that they are worthy of termination? You want to. What are the implications of releasing this employee in terms of backlash to the company, my work units, and my professional integrity? If I do this, what will be the repercussions? If I do this in terms of the backlash to my company, my units, and my professional integrity. What are the implications to me as a manager, to the result of this department, and to the morale of people working here to keep this troublemaking employee. If we keep that guy in, is it going to serve us well? Or is going to be a disincentive that other employees who probably might be in the same, situation will feel threatened and might not be able to give their best? Or is it going to shape behavior and people will know that we don't take nonsense, we are here, we are serious people? You need to ask these questions. And these are very difficult questions that one will have to, ask. And finding answers to these questions honestly and thoroughly will help you reach a decision with confidence and peace. And once you have made the termination decision, you might need to call for a meeting with the employee. Before the meeting, you would have to determine whether the termination requires that the employee be escorted from the property following the meeting, or if they be allowed to pack up their personal belongings. These things have to be done. And if they work in the sensitive area that is vulnerable to sabotage or tampering, or where they may make comment to co-workers that can be overheard by clients, then the safety of the workplace is more important, and you have to arrange immediate departures. For staff that have remote access to computers, business cell phones, keys, access to, cards, a plan must be put in place to ensure that there are no security breaches following this termination. There have been times that people have been terminated their jobs and then they go away with all their customers, okay, to a new company. Okay, these things have happened. Just terminating that person's appointment shifts about 80% of your customer to the other company, okay, because of negative media coverage and all that. The person might not be that tricky person who will make that capital out of that whole thing, okay? Make that political capital out of the whole thing, and it becomes very difficult to manage these situations. We'll go on air, say certain things and all that. So one will have to look at these things, and these are the direct consequences, especially when you are dealing with someone who is very recalcitrant. So communicating termination should be done in a brief and professional manner. You will have the HR representative with you. If the employees are aware this is the disciplinary meeting, they may have a union representative or advocate with them. If you are a unionized place, you have to invite the union representative to attend, and all that. They have to be part of it. Keep the dismissal meeting short and free from personal biases and remarks. You've gone through the process already, so you don't need. If you have had previous meeting about an issue, you can briefly recap why you are here today. If this is the result of the serious incident and no previous meeting took place, you have to calmly review the circumstance and deliver the news in the termination letter. So that is very, very, during termination, remember process, you have to ensure that your documentation is complete and excellent. I had a personal experience with one of my staff when I used to work somewhere, who came to tell me this guy was one of the leading guys, but was actually making every staff who was working under him look stupid, that no one else was working, and he was the only person working. And so created the impression that the staff were nothing to write home about. And that was very worrying, because we're all working in a team. So if they are training, he reports to me, but he's able to report directly to the boss. So there was one training coming up, and I hear that he was the only person who was selected for the training and all that. Then I have to intervene, send a mail to the training manager and say that this is my unit. This guy works under me. I don't think that he's the only one who has the capacity to do that. So what we did was that we had to include 2 other people to join the training, okay? And honestly, because of that incident that happened, at a point in time, he said he wanted to leave and wrote a whole thesis because I don't appreciate his work and I don't do that. But the point in here was he was leaving. It was not termination. I had to manage the situation. When the HR manager called me and they said, this is the allegation that, and then when they started asking the guy the questions, it came out that he was lying, right? And that he wanted rather my position. And he thought that it was a very Herculean task and that he had to leave. And for that reason, that's what. And they ended up when he left, because the process was not managed very well from HR point of view. He had the access to the server, brought the server down several times until we did certain things to recover. And that was very, very serious. Okay. So it is important that we manage these things very well. Other than that, it could have dire consequences when a person is leaving, and particularly then when the person is peeved. Okay, it could damage the reputation of what? The company. So these things have to be done very well. Finally, you have to notify and announce officially the employee departure to all related managers, supervisors, employees, customers, business partners. Such steps is important to do to protect the organization interest, customers, and information to avoid any further misconduct. Nonetheless, your announcement had to be professional and should comply the related organization policies. Remember that the purpose of this announcement is to provide awareness and protect the organization interest, and not to defame the publicly criticize the termination employee. Okay, not to defame and publicly criticize the terminated employee. That's not what you want to do. So what we have done, I mean, in quite this 45 minutes or 50 minutes is actually to look at the fundamentals of HR. And we have looked at all the processes that are involved from recruitment until you get to termination. The fact that we need to manage these processes very well so we are able to recruit the best for the organization, be able to retain them, and then we are able to manage them very well to achieve the vision of the organization as much as possible. We do not want to get to the stage where a staff's appointment has to be terminated. But when it requires so, that is a daunting task, but we need to manage the situation very well so that we do not create unnecessary public, that is issues related to media, bad media coverage, that we do not get ourselves into that arena, for which reason we have to manage the situation very well. So we'll be dealing with the next section, which is the seventh, model in the next couple of videos that we will do. So this is the sixth, that is the fundamentals in human resource management. Thank you so much for your time.